I should scream good afternoon and welcome everybody. This would be the Jeff Cameron Show, even though it is Seminole Headlines Day. It's kind of a combo trick we've got going here. Ira's at a convention. So Tom Lang, my dear cohort, filling in and helping us kind of put together a little something. So it's a pseudo JCS, pseudo Seminole Headlines, if you will. But we are going to start with Florida State talk. So I will do that. Thanks for being here. I'm Jeff. That will be Tom here in a second. Hey, listen, let's begin with this just because I have fond memories as well as sort of sadness centered around Antonio Cromartie's career at Florida State. It always felt like what could have been, and obviously he went on to the National Football League where he was a Pro Bowler. I remember Cromartie at Lincoln High School when Lincoln was a juggernaut. Not that Lincoln stinks now, that's for sure. But I can remember because it was in the early days of my radio career. Cromartie was obviously at Florida State beginning in 2003, but I remember him prior to that at Lincoln. And I'd been on the air for a few years and gotten to know a little bit of what Coach Wilson and what that program was about, and churning out stud after stud after stud, especially the long, rangy, athletic secondary members. And the thing is, it comes up again because now one of his children is coming to Florida State. We'll talk about that in a second. Not exactly, Tom, the same markers, if you will, in terms of size and speed. Antonio was a freak at 6'2" plus. 205 pounds, 4'4" guy who also, unfortunately for Florida State, really never got to blossom into what he was going to become because of the injury that he suffered in camp. And I remember the day I got that phone call that he had blown his ACL and that we were going to get screwed because he was so good. You knew he was not going to stick around after that injury, that basically he was going to have the surgery and declare for the NFL at the end of the year. And we were going to miss out on that potential because he had an interception against Miami the previous year, which was unreal. And you saw how effortless it was for him to make plays. And then he became a 4-time Pro Bowler in the NFL. We know how the story goes. But, man, Antonio Cromartie Jr. got me thinking about all that as Florida State gets the commitment from the younger Cromartie. And, listen, the hype around him is not what it was around his dad. I'm not trying to ruin his moment in any way. He's got to be so excited to follow in the footsteps and to have the opportunity. He said in his quote, Coach Sertan told him that it wasn't that they didn't offer him just because his dad was who he was. They think he's got real potential. And he's like a 3-star prospect, right? So, anytime you have a kid who's athletic, and he's 6 feet tall, 185 pounds, who can really run, you hope that maybe they blossom into what you've seen their dad or their brother or their uncle be. If you got a name like that, we know that name. We know what kind of player that name belonged to. You hope that maybe he's a late bloomer. Maybe he's a kid that continues to grow, continues to get better at playing football and becomes something more than what he's labeled as in the recruiting realm currently.
Yeah, but you're looking for a pleasant surprise.
Yeah.
You're looking at 105 scholarships, which is where this thing is likely to go. You could take chances like this, and it really, I think this would be in the olden days of last year or any previous year, maybe a walk-on, wink, wink, nod, nod. I mean, we've had legacies before that are on the sideline, yes. And you go, and everything from, I remember Monk's kids were on the team too, and they were just so jazzed to be a part of the operation. But I know Peter Warwick's son is on the team, and I think he might have gotten some time in the Charleston Southern game. I'm not sure if he got a snap or not, but look, this is still a 3-star prospect across multiple recruiting services. If it turns out well for you, it turns out well for you. I will say that his interview went off of his official visit this weekend was awesome. He was talking about how he can't wait to be held accountable. He can't wait to, prove that he's here, not just because of who his dad is, but because he deserves to be a part of the roster. I mean, he's got the right mindset. I sense zero entitlement out of Antonio Cromartie Jr., at least from the interviews that Warchant's conducted on video and the things I've heard off video as well. Matt Lasser got some of those quotes last night from Antonio Jr. But when you expand your rosters, you can make a move like this, and we'll see. Raise hell, man, because he seems hell bent on creating his own story, and if he does, then it's to Florida State's benefit. Sounded like he wanted to be nowhere else but Tallahassee.
Well, I don't think it's hard for Florida State fans to certainly root for a kid who's got that kind of exuberance for the school that they also share the same passion for and love. It certainly adds to it that his dad was what he was. And, when you read a quote from a kid saying that FSU is his dream school and that he was waiting for this a long time and it's finally here. I've been around FSU my entire life. It holds a special place in my heart. Look, let's be honest. Florida State fans, alumni, supporters of any kind, that's the way they feel. They're excited to hear somebody else feel that way. Too often, fans apply their passion for their school and think that the players are going to share the same sentiment that they have for the school, and that it shouldn't just be a business transaction. And you and I know a lot of times that it's somewhere in between. Walking the halls and being on campus and going over to Langford Green or Strozier Hall or wherever it was, that may have a soft spot in your heart and my heart, classes we took and the times we studied and the friends we made and the experiences we had. Whereas a lot of times a high school football player who has a lot of options and he has a chance to go to a bunch of elite schools to play football and realize their dream, school is sort of secondary because they're trying to get to the NFL. And so their thought is a lot of times not as near and dear to the heart. I say all of that because there's nothing wrong with that. I understand it. But when you find a kid who feels the way that you do about the school, you embrace that kid. You want to see it happen for him. You're like, all right, yes, this guy loves Florida State in the same way that I love Florida State. Listen, he was on a state championship winning team. He was a starter. He was a good player for them. I believe that's Carrollton High, if I remember reading properly from a while back. Yeah, man, good for him. I hope it happens. I hope he turns into a star. We need it.
Yeah, I think if it turns out well for him, it'll be somewhere between a LaMarcus Brutus or a Javian Elliott success story where we go, well, didn't expect that. That is nice. Good work, Florida State. Way to take a chance on a kid. You'll take a chance on a legacy at 105 scholarships. And I doubt there's much more that you need to commit other than the, giving the opportunity. And I think he gets it. That's the whole thing to me is if you're going to expand it, I think he would have been taken as a walk-on in a different era at Florida State. As long as they understand the magnitude of the opportunity and they don't seem like they were always going to get it and there's an entitlement, he has none of that. Seems like a very mature kid, and we'll see what he brings to the table.
4-time Pro Bowler was his dad. He led the league in interceptions in 2007, and all the time I watched him, I remember thinking, man, I know he was first team all ACC in 2004 here, but he could have had a massive career in college. He could have been, he was a freak show. And speaking of freak shows in FSU, we've lamented what happened this past year ad nauseum. We've talked so much about what was lost that led to the failures of this past season. And we've debated and tried to place value or percentage, apply percentages to, well, I think it was 50% this, 50% this, or 30%. The snub didn't do him any favors. And then whatever it was, right? At the end of the day, most of the time, you can certainly start the conversation with having lost a ton of talent. Right? That's where you can usually begin the conversation. So let's just start with the quantifiable things like losing NFL players. And I was watching, as many of you were last night, the Rams dismantle the Vikings with a defensive performance that, couldn't have been more timely to get that kind of pressure on a quarterback whose psyche might have been a little brittle going into the game, given what just happened the week before against the Lions. Well, it was all on display, and Jared Verse helped make that resounding with a 57-yard fumble return in which, Tom, he looked like he was shot out of a cannon upon picking up the football. Braden Fisk had a good night. All the reminders that you lost NFL talent, true, but you lost elite NFL talent in the case of a few guys. And those two were on display last night, wreaking havoc for the Vikings offensive line and Sam Darnold.
Well, the other part of it is with the Rams, they've lost a Hall of Famer in the interior of their defensive line, one of the best to ever play defensive tackle. And they replaced him with a couple of guys that are wreaking havoc, and that's pretty cool. And, Jared Verse is now going to get elevated to a different place. He already was last night. You're seeing national talking heads talk about the splash, not just the fumble return for the touchdown, but the next possession. Yeah. He kind of has a frog splash drop from wrestling, 5-star frog splash on Darnold, which they didn't throw a flag for, even though Darnold was already pinned on the ground. He's all over the place. He's mic'd up. He's enthusiastic. He's imposing. He understood the assignment once he picked up the football, too. Look, you understand the precious chance that it is to score a touchdown in an NFL game, let alone a playoff game if you're on the defensive line. You're going to make the most of it. And he certainly did with one hell of an athletic leap into the end zone for the punctuation mark on the touchdown. It's just you're seeing national talking heads that you follow for NFL news now talking about Jared Verse and putting him in this different stratosphere. He's going to get more coverage. I know Fisk comes along with it. That's more for the inside football types, the Baldingers of the world. Last night in the Manning cast, his name came up, Braden's name came up because they were getting into the weeds about the All-22 and things that they're seeing from the Rams defensive front. He's not quite the household name Jared Verse is becoming before all of our eyes. But that's so cool, man. I remember when I was a kid, Reggie White or a young Julius Peppers, those were the household defensive end names that everybody knew. John Randall, we finally got us one in Warren Sapp. Simeon Rice with Arizona, the Phoenix Cardinals at the time. Is Jared heading into that territory? Yes, he is. Absolutely, he's on that path.
Well, Jared Verse is becoming a superstar in the league, and he's going to get a lot of opportunities because he's in Los Angeles. He's going to get a lot of opportunities for endorsements moving forward as his name gets better known. He is gregarious. He's affable. He's fun. He smiles. It's worth $1 million, that smile alone, right? He is so he's got a zeal for playing the game and for loving life and embracing opportunity. It's the kind of thing where you would think companies want their brand attached with that because there's so much to fall in love with a guy like that, right? How hard he plays, how fast he plays, how violent he is on the field, and how affable he is off of it. How much fun he has playing the game. When he's mic'd up, he's hilarious. So you have all these things, and he's going to win the Rookie of the Year. Defensive Rookie of the Year. He's going to win the Defensive Rookie of the Year. It's if you look at the odds, it's not close. So he's going to win that, and he's showing up in big moments. If you think back on the Rams now, they've had a Sunday night game, they've had a Monday night game, they've had this game. They've had a few primetime moments over the course of this year. In fact, when they beat the Vikings the first time around, it was on a Sunday night. And in those moments when a country is watching, right, an NFL-loving country is watching, he's played great. The timing of when you do these things, all of it matters to help elevate you as a brand. I hate saying that. I hate the way that is just thrown around these days, that people are brands. But honestly, when it comes to endorsements and NFL players and who gets them and who doesn't, you do have to think along those lines. And Jared Verse is a guy that, to me, is going to accrue a lot of opportunities and offers. He is a sensational player. I think, Tom, really quick, in looking back at his time at FSU, brief as it was, there's a guy that comes in from Albany and, had that great game against Syracuse when he was at Albany. And we talked about how, hey, I wonder how much it translates. It certainly translated on that day against that level of competition. That bodes well. Let's see what he's going to do. And he got here with a self-assurance that is seldom seen. The interview I did with him that we ran on the channel and that we carried on the Jeff Cameron show, I think endeared him immediately to the fan base. They loved him right off the bat. He was the right kind of brash and confident without being over the top, without it being too self-aggrandizing. It was like he knew that, hey, I'm going to work really hard, and if I do, I'm going to be a good player. I got a lot of faith in my ability. I know where I'm headed. And he did. He did know where he was headed, and he's right, and he's fulfilled all of it. I tell you what I'm most shocked by. To me, the ability to go from college to the NFL in year one and dominate with every facet of the game. So the ability to set the edge, if you need to set the edge in that league, is very difficult at what I thought would be very difficult for him anyhow initially in year one. Because that is an awful lot to be on your shoulders while also trying to rush the passer and be as dynamic and explosive as he is. He's got the quickness that leads to power. He's got all the things, and he's developing more and more moves as the season goes along. He did that here at FSU as well. At first, he was a one-trick pony. He got better and better at it over time. He showed patience and a willingness to understand a role. Listen, teams are figured out that I can get after the passer. They're going to set their protections differently because of that. I've got to be patient, make sure that I can impact the game in the way that I can impact the game that may not involve highlight reel stats or highlight reel moments where you see me getting after the passer through the first 4 weeks. Remember that final year, the sack numbers weren't there in the beginning because, again, he understood that it was being blocked up differently and his role had changed, and teams knew what he was coming into that season, his final year. So yeah, that's maturity. That is a presence of mind. That is obviously a physicality that does not belie his age. It's amazing to me that he is all of those things because it takes people a while. Usually takes you a couple of years to adjust. There's been no adjustment for him. He's been dominant from day one. He was dominant in camp. They were showing the highlights in camp before they ever played a game, and he's throwing offensive linemen to the ground.
Yeah, I remember the talking point from his senior season that, where are the sacks? Where are the numbers? And we had multiple segments saying, if you watch the games, you see the impact. There's a plan for him, or the ball is out of the quarterback's hand immediately. So you're not going to run up numbers. It's much like when people asked, where's Xavier Rhodes' interceptions? Well, they're not throwing the ball at him.
Well, they did it. Jalen Ramsey was the one that they did it with over and over again. Jalen Ramsey has a career one pick. I'm like, well, look, man.
Yeah, if before the play starts, it's a non-starter that we're running that way, that we're holding the football, that we're throwing and targeting this particular defensive back, you're not going to rack up a ton of stats, but the impact is immeasurable. At this point, for LSU, if you're doing a segment on old batted balls, you're saying, well, is he anything? Is he worth anything when Jared Verse isn't on the other side of the line? That's going to be the question for them is, I know he produced a whole lot in 2023. Well, Jared Verse and Braden Fisk were on that defensive line. Maybe I could have produced. That's what he's going to have to overcome from the scouting community, his own film this past season, and people in LSU are going to be asking those rightful questions. And this is where, again, you're right. He had the size in his senior year at a level that he didn't the year prior. He's one of those great success stories for the training program, but then also his own commitment. He went to a different physical level his last year on campus here where you go, oh, that's imposing. And he would put our tackles on their butt routinely in practice. And you go, okay, well, he understands that he has to be a complete player more than just a specialist. And he is a complete player. This is one of those storybook, fairy tale type storylines that we always want as Nole fans when we see guys go to the next level. I mean, remember how much joy we felt when you saw the video of Braden Fisk getting drafted. Jared is arriving at the Rams.
Yeah, they were in tears. It was awesome.
They get on the phone with each other and they're crying because they're so happy to be playing next to each other again at the next level. If the story ended there, it's a good ending. They both get their money. Nothing comes to their careers. But wow, what a way to end their Florida State career. No, it's just going to a different level. It keeps on going higher and higher. And you've got a chance for Jared Verse to be one of the first Florida State Seminoles you mention when his pro career is over. I'm not guaranteeing that he's going to Canton. I'm just saying for a first year Nole, this is as good as it gets. The only Nole that I can think of in recent memory that's on that level is Dalvin. Anquan Bolden set records years and years and years ago of most catches for a rookie. I don't know if he hit the yard record, but he certainly hit the reception record for a rookie. Like, this is otherworldly stuff. And it should be noted last night as well that Braden Fisk turned into half of a sack. And Keir Thomas got on the field in mop-up duty and registered a tackle. And then also Cam Akers had one of the most explosive plays for Minnesota on the ground when he had a long run of just under 30 yards. So good night for the Noles all around in that football game. Not so much for Minnesota, but Cam Akers is one of the reasons they smiled.
Yeah, I think for Florida State, now it gets interesting. For a long time there, when we were struggling, it was really difficult to watch the draft and just not hear Florida State players' names at all, or not even have the opportunity to look forward to hearing it. That's tough. Like, I love the NFL. Not everybody does. And if you're a diehard college football fan and you're invested in Florida State and you're invested in college football, you remember guys and you remember their careers if you played against them or if they played for you. And then you're kind of interested to see where they go. And you're obviously passionate about where they go if they're a Nole. For a long time, not having but like a singular candidate or, one or two guys, it's depressing. You're watching the draft, you're seeing all these kids go from schools that you've played against or you're competing against. It's usually holding a mirror up to you, right? It's telling you like, well, you weren't very good and there's a reason. You don't have a lot of NFL talent and these other teams do. Florida State was really good a couple of seasons ago now, and you're seeing the byproduct that a lot of guys from that team from the undefeated regular season that had good years, really good years this year. I mean, you flip around, I have the Sunday ticket, and I watch as many of these games as I possibly can, and it was great all year long, flipping around game to game to game. Oh, there's a Nole. There's a Nole. Oh, look at that. He's getting a lot of run. Oh, there's a Nole. Yeah, it was very exciting to watch that play out this season.
Well, now you've got quite a few in the next round of the NFL playoffs. Mario Edwards Jr. had a couple of big plays against the Chargers last Saturday. And
crazy.
Yeah, remember the one interior rush that he had? I think he got credit for the TFL or the sack on that play. But he starts sprinting around the field, and you remember back to when he was a chunker here. He was a large guy. And I remember when he came for his pro day after we won the national championship and he had slimmed down to 280. I was like, oh, all right, now you do.
We had wanted him to do it the whole time.
I know it. But he's an interior guy for the Texans now, and he'll go against, not heads up, of course, but Derek Nottie is an interior player for the Chiefs. Those two guys have had long, productive careers at the pro level. Obviously, with the Rams, you got a couple of players, and Johnny Wilson. And we have another Nole on Philly. I forget who it is. Josh Sweat. Duh.
Josh Sweat. I was just about to say Josh Sweat's done really well.
He's on television now. He's got a Downy commercial with his mom, which is really cool. He was one of my favorite interviews when he was here. So I'm glad to see that he's getting some camera time as well.
Well, and remember, you felt like Josh Sweat. I'll be honest with you. I think he's had a better pro career than he had a college career. I think he was a good player here. He's turned into a very consistent and good player for a long time in the National Football League. He's a name in the league.
He's one of those wins where I know the recruiting services, some of them say, well, we're projecting for high school, we're projecting for pro. If you're one of the recruiting services, you say, well, we're projecting pro potential, and they're very proud of these things. Josh Sweat would be a hit in that regard. He would unequivocally be a hit because you're right. He was okay here. There were moments where you go, that's why he was a blue chip. But in the pros, he's been phenomenal.
Jeff Cameron's show kind of filling in on a Seminole Headlines Days. So stay with us. Back for more in a moment here on 93.3 Real Talk Radio and Warchant TV.
When the calendar turns from one year to the next, we all feel that jolt of energy, but we got to capture it. We got to move on it. You might be thinking to yourself in 2025, how am I going to make this year different? And how am I going to build something for myself? You might be dying to be your own boss. See if you can turn a business idea into a reality, one that you've been kicking around for a while. Well, Shopify is how you're going to make it happen, and let me tell you how. Shopify makes it simple to create your brand, open for business, and get your first sale on the books. Get your store up and running easily with thousands of customizable templates. No coding or design skills are required on your part. All you need to do is drag and drop. And their powerful social media tools let you connect all of your channels and create shoppable posts to help you sell everywhere people scroll. Shopify makes it easy to manage growing your business. They help with the details like shipping, taxes, and payments from one single dashboard, allowing you to focus on the important stuff like growing your business. With Shopify, your first sale is closer than you think. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/warchant, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/warchant to start selling with Shopify today. Shopify.com/warchant.
Wanted to mention this because we were talking about Cromartie committing last segment at the beginning of it. And, Ira has been doing these great previews on the site on warchant.com, talking about the way too early, as he's labeled him, the way too early projected depth chart for each of the segment groups. If you haven't been reading those, it's good. It's good to certainly he's done defensive line. He's done linebackers. We talked about linebackers yesterday on the program. So here we go. Let's do the one that he did from today, which is defensive backs. And it segues nicely because, again, we were just talking about a defensive back commit. And I was wondering when he did this whether or not he was going to talk about the difference in roles in Tony White's defense in the 3-3-5 and what's utilized there. And he did a good job. I'll give Ira credit there. He did a good job of pointing out that the rover in Tony White's Nebraska defense is a hybrid player. It's a linebacker, if you will, that can really run, one of these bigger safeties that come up and mix it up in run support. And they have to be able to do that. And I remember getting excited about that because, look, Florida State obviously loses Fentrell Cypress from a year ago. They lose Azareye'h Thomas, who declared for the NFL draft, and we wish those gentlemen good luck. But there are a lot of names in that secondary that we've all been excited about. Quindarius Jones, Jabril Rawls is a guy. You get excited about certain guys, Kai Bates, Jamari Howard, Charles Lester. Shaheem Brown comes back this year. Shaheem's got, to me, to have that season. He's got to have that season where you pay it off, where you say, ton of experience, smart guy, understands the defense, knows where people should be, doesn't always play to what I think his athletic tools are. And that might be the byproduct of a guy who was extremely frustrated, as everybody was on this team a year ago. How much of that does that affect your play when things aren't going well and guys aren't doing what they're supposed to do and people are out of position and communication is breaking down? Look, by definition, when you fire the coordinators that Florida State did, you are admitting that there were problems, that the job was not being done. It's no longer an opinion of an afternoon talk show host. It's the opinion of the head coach, and the results are the byproduct. You see, hey, look, this team is failing. They're failing to get off the field on third down. They can't create turnovers. They're not communicative. We see a lot of finger pointing. And after a while, I think it really did lead to a downward spiral in effort. Now, you could say, well, that's taking a shot at guys. Yes, it is. But I also understand how it can happen to some extent where the loss is mounting and the miscommunication and the frustration does at times perhaps affect a player's effort. And what I would say by that is, well, most of the time we would say that's unforgivable. I think some of the time, Tom, they're not even really aware they're doing it. There's a little bit of a here we go again attitude, sort of, that becomes pervasive. It permeates the whole unit, the whole segment group, you just kind of like, well, all right, we're out here just playing out the string, kind of just play. It's a bad day on the golf course in which you triple bogey the first hole and double the second. Well, you ain't breaking your record today. You're not going to shoot your load today after we're 5 over through 2. And how many times, for you golfers, you know this, have you tried to kind of give yourself a pep talk, like, let's lock it in? I mean, we're a birdie and a par away from maybe getting back on track. You don't see it that way. You're miserable, you're angry, and you kind of stand over the ball and you hit the shot, but you're really not hyper-focused in the way you would be had you gone par. So I think some of that happens in football. I think Shaheem's got to have himself that year. Maybe he does. But where does everybody else fit in, and what are the different roles? Ira illuminates that in the article. You talk about the bigger guys, that rover hybrid position. Well, I don't know about you, Tom. The first guy that comes up in my mind is KJ Kirkland. I mean, how perfect does that seem to be for him? Kirkland is a monster. He's over 200 pounds. He almost looks like a linebacker. This seems so suited for him. I would nominate another guy, Ashland Barker. I think that's another big guy, over 200 pounds. I mean, remember when we saw him? I remember coming off the practice field. For all that we got wrong a year ago, and you guys love to remind us of it, that's fine. How many times did I mention I really like Ashland Barker, that we got to find a way? I mean, he's a physical dude.
Yeah, I think there's a chance that your two deep gets upended here because you got a different set of eyes from the coordinator level and the safeties level to see what exactly they're capable of doing. And yeah, you got to be okay with that. That's also part of what I'm doing with the receiver room. I'll return to the defensive backs, but I'm reconciling in my mind that there are going to be players that I wanted to see play well at Florida State that are going to leave. It's new blood in the coaching staff. And so therefore you're going to see different decisions made, and some kids, maybe they prosper somewhere else, but it ain't going to be here. And I think it's the same thing for the defensive back room. There might be a recruit that I loved from a cycle or two ago that just doesn't fit here because we're asking different things. We're asking for different principles to be executed at either safety or corner or slot corner. But yeah, look, Shyheim Brown is built out of a factory to be, I think, in the rover position or a slot position, but he needs to grow up. And he needs to show you that, like the kid that was out there on the field the first couple of games that was checking everybody into the right plays and was responsible and not getting the feedback that he wanted because he was leading. He was attempting to do the right thing. Well, once he didn't get the feedback he wanted, there was blasé play. That kid can't be the kid that takes the field. So we'll see if it clicks with him and these defensive back coaches. If it doesn't, then he needs to go play somewhere else in the fall. But if it does, then he's going to be one of your starters. But I'm most excited about specifically the two outside corner positions. I know we've gotten some questions about this on the in the chat. I've seen it in our email inbox as well. Well, Quindarius Jones to me is minus money, your leading candidate to be one of your starters.
Yes.
He's already a junior. Time flies. And it feels like we got to get something out of him because, time's running out of eligibility. I hope that he is certainly a starter. I think on the boundary side suits him better with the size, but who knows? He can turn and fly. He can flip his hips and fly. I'll be interested to see exactly where they slot him, but he's definitely going to be a starter. And then from there, it is an open competition, and it's a lot of young names that we're excited about over the years. It could be Charles Lester. It could be Bates. It could be Jabril Rawls. Hell, I suppose Edwin Joseph has a chance to be one of those players. I like him to play closer to the football. I hope Edwin Joseph is a part of this conversation deep into spring practice, and we just say after spring, yeah, between what the coaches are saying about him and what we're seeing in practice, there's your enforcer over the middle of the field. I want more guys to play like Edwin Joseph does and like Earl Little does. They just need to know where their assignments are and play under control, but you cannot recreate, I don't think, unless you have it in somebody's DNA, the ferocity that an Edwin Joseph plays with or an Earl Little plays with just because you ask a guy to try harder. I hope they cultivate a couple more options and we get to see what Lester's all about. Maybe Jamari Howard or somebody else is like that too, Kai Bates. But I want to see more aggressiveness. We got a couple of guys who have it in him, like LaMarcus Joyner did, like Terrence Brooks did. Hopefully we find a few more with this staff.
Well, I'm excited by the fact there are so many names as candidates whose athleticism, size, and speed and length fit the bill. Like we haven't even mentioned Ricky Knight, who turned heads at practice every day and looked like a player that was on the come. Let's put it that way. I know he is smaller than Edwin Joseph, same height, but he's a playmaker. I think he's got an opportunity. Listen, going back to something you mentioned at the very end there, do not sleep on Jamari Howard. Now, I love that kid. And at 6'2", 195 pounds, runs like the wind. He is an unbelievable athlete. The speed turned your head when you saw him. Now, he got hurt, and it was really sad to me because I thought he was having, early on, a very good camp. People were talking about him. We all thought, like, who is that? Wow, that's and we had to fight like hell to keep him from Miami, the whole thing. And then, unfortunately, he had an ACL. And I remember seeing the injury and going, damn it. he's going to be out for the year. And then they confirmed it later on. And the attribute of difference-making speed, like all these guys are good athletes. He had another level of speed. I don't know what that will be like coming off that injury. None of us do. Hopefully at his age and the advancements in modern medicine, we see guys return from things that used to be devastating all the time. And not only do they return and they look no different than they did prior to the injury. It's remarkable the amount of shortened recoveries and advancements to get these guys rehab. I know from in my own house here with my own son, like, not that he's that level of athlete compared to them, but like, you can have these crazy injuries, and if you're young and athletic and the advancements of medical science, like you can be back doing things that you should. It doesn't stand to reason. It doesn't make any sense to me. So I'm going to bet that a freak like that, who has attacked the rehab, which he was, as we watched him all this past year at practice, he was attacking his rehab. He's gonna have a say in this. We don't know because we haven't seen him on the field in a game. So people out of sight, out of mind. But I think he's going to be in the conversation to play a role here. I think he can be that good.
Just, with this defense, it works in concert with the linebacker level, and they're going to be multiple. But just when I watch a 3-3-5 at work, and when it's good, when it's bad, you go, well, they're soft and they're undersized, and so you could just run right at them. But
run right at them. Yep.
When it's good, the 3-3-5, the one word that pops in my head over and over and over again, swarm.
Yeah.
Swarm.
Physical, they get flying in.
They come flying from everywhere. Yeah, it's a triangulation, an intersection of physicality, and there's always rallying to the football. I mean, it is the opposite of what last year's defense was. And look, it worked when you had good players, but I felt like it was a bunch of dudes on islands that needed to make plays. Sometimes you'd have, a combined effort where you'd see a few players rally and make a tackle. Usually it's in the backfield. But when you think about it from, the defensive backs, we're going press man, we're going one-on-one. I remember we made a stop in the end zone against LSU a couple of years ago in Orlando. Adam Fuller said after the game was over, we think when we're in one-on-ones, that's an advantageous situation for us. A lot of people talk about receivers in one-on-ones. We like being in one-on-ones. I feel like this set is more about it's the sum of your parts, and you have to be willing to be physical and rally to the football. There are some candidates here. Florida State has recruited a better quality of defensive back the last couple of seasons. When I saw Charles Lester for the first time, just how wiry he is, you think he's going to be a small kid. But I'm talking about photos on On3's website. Then you get to practice, you go, oh, he's not small. Mm-hmm. Same thing with Jamari Howard, same Kai Bates. Man, that's a big dude.
Kai Bates is a big dude, yeah.
They've got a lot of modern body types to work with, but the question is what's inside the chest? And then also from a confidence standpoint, how much can they build in the spring? They've got options, though. I'm sure that's part of the reason Tony White took the job was he saw that the defensive backfield that he's going to be multiple with already has plenty of talent aboard for him to institute and implement his vision.
To your point about having an awful lot of size and athleticism, again, every time I'll give you a good idea of this, like when we look at the transfer portal and we look at recruiting and we combine the two and we talk about like where's Florida State at? Well, we all know, we've had the conversation how they have to do better recruiting the prep ranks. The one area in which I kind of say that they've been exceptional or at least very good that stands out is in the secondary. Like every time we're even in the running for a member of the secondary, especially if it's a guy like in the portal, I roll my eyes because I'm like, no, we're fine there. We have too many guys if there's such a thing. I know people might say, I don't know, Jeff. No, I don't think that they failed on the back end last year due to a lack of talent. I don't think so. I think we've got what you're describing, Tom, right now is the need to have a coordinated defense.
Right. So, well, yeah, look, you watch even in the NFL playoffs, and the Bucs had a couple of examples, but you see it all over the place. Third and long situations. A guy's on an island, and then he's guilty of a PI.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
They panic.
Because they panic. Yeah, they don't trust the technique, and they panic. So it can happen to the best of the best, but when you don't feel confident, you're on an island. It's like being a pitcher. and having a bad half inning, and everybody's watching you, and you can feel that, and it reflects back through a television screen, or if you're in the stands, you can see when a pitcher is feeling the pressure that's applied from him by all eyes on me failing.
Yeah.
And it's an uncomfortable moment. It's almost its own individual sport in that way when it goes bad. And that's why defensive backs often will point to their teammate and jump up and down and say it's your fault, because they don't want to feel all of that pressure on them. But it's something where if you play with confidence, you watch guys swarm together, team up, communicate with each other. That's one of the things in practice I love to hear when I'm there. It's a sign that guys are working in concert. Communication about where the ball is, not just that the ball's in the air for the throw, but then also outside, underthrown, things like that. Pre-snap communication on, are we going to switch in this situation? Like all those little things, you need to communicate exceptionally well, but you have to play with confidence. And so can they restore the confidence here? Because you're right. You're looking at the depth chart that Ira has posted on Warchant. I'm just going to go through the sizes of the players. Doesn't matter the name. 6'2", 6'1", 6'2". That's one corner position. The other half of the field, 6'1", 6'2", 6'2". Safety, 6'2", 6'3", 6'1". Rover, 6'1", 6 feet, 6'1". This isn't 5'9", but he can jump out of the gym. These are long, rangy athletes that also have some size to them at 200 pounds, 215, 220. It could get exciting if you can extract the potential from these guys in this scheme.
My guess is they do, and my other guess is the other element of all of this comes into play: confidence. Playing with some confidence. You got to have it. We know it's the magic word. It's the magic ingredient. The physical tools are all there. So what's missing? They got to have some confidence. That comes with the success of playing together and doing well. We'll see how quickly they can get that when we start up in the spring. It's going to be one of the many things we're looking for. It's Jeff Cameron Show / Seminole Headlines, 93.3 Real Talk Radio, Warchant TV. Wrapping up the hour, and I'll do so by noting it's bad news for Notre Dame. First of all, let me ask you a question. We got the national championship less than a week from right now. It is, in a weird way, joyous. It warms the heart to hear so many people begin the conversation around the national championship game by saying, well, once again, no SEC presence in the national championship game. I do like how everybody's talking point or the lead for articles surrounding the game is to take shots at the SEC, even when they're unwarranted. Like in some cases, you'll see that's a reach. You just did that because you wanted clicks. Yep. And that's what you had to say something so that you could put it in the headline so that people would click on it. But you know what that is? That is a fostering of resentment. And it is beautiful to watch on a national stage, the fostering of resentment. Because I wondered, once the mouthpiece for the SEC was omnipresent due to the working relationship and partnership that they had, as opposed to kind of meted out over several partnerships, right? And they weren't all in the way that they are now with ESPN being the mouthpiece. Now they are, to the point where even once respected analysts are taking shots on the regular and pushing back, and it's created a very obvious discussion and talking point for people not in Tallahassee. People all over the country recognizing that Kirk Herbstreit's changed, recognizing all over the country that there's an agenda on game day, recognizing all over the country that the broadcasts sound a little weird when Joe Testator is unbuckling his pants to talk about a player in the SEC or a team, right? All of that, like, this feels like maybe they got a dog in the fight. It doesn't look like they're objectively talking about the games or the teams. Right. No, it's fun to hear it talked about that way right now. Every article is sort of, well, and we get set for the national championship game, which doesn't have anybody from the SEC in it. I'm like, okay.
Well, that's because Big Daddy Saban's on the TV channel now. This is the thing, man. His impact, the SEC national champions of the last, 15 years, other than Auburn, the one time, which is a Cam Newton story, it's all Nick Saban programs. It's either LSU, which he turned around from nothing and made into a machine that they're still recruiting off the reputation of that success, and it begets Les Miles championship, which, I mean, come on now, that's like a Larry Coker national championship versus what Butch did down in Miami.
Yes.
The Georgia program is the Saban model. Hell, our national championship in 2013 is the Saban model. It's all Saban. And now that he's gone, And, there's looks like in the foundation some issues for Georgia where they're still going to be in the conversation, but they're more like when Clemson was in the conversation. It's not that they're this domineering force over the sport. It's a nice place to be because old Big Daddy Nick Saban ain't going to bail your ass out anymore. So now you're on even footing from a coaching acumen standpoint with the rest of the country, SEC. Let's see how you handle it.
I say that to say this. Notre Dame starting left tackle Anthony Knapp is going to miss the game against Ohio State. That is huge. They also learned, unfortunately, that they're going to lose their starting right guard as well, Rocco Spindler. So great. You're going against Ohio State's front, and you're going to miss your starting left tackle and your starting right guard. As if I didn't already think Ohio State was going to kill Notre Dame, I'm going to add to the ledger here that I gave the points on day one, and I will continue to do so. You might disagree with me on that front. That's fine. They could muck it up, but I think they got a tough road to hoe.
Will Howard can help them. Notre Dame stay in the game. He doesn't throw it until he sees it, and sometimes it's far too late. That's why Jeremiah Smith wasn't productive. I get he was bracketed. There's enough one-on-ones and watching the Skycast. Cut it loose, and he doesn't. If I'm Marcus Freeman, we get past their own 35-yard line, you have 4 downs. That would be the way I approach the game.
Hour number 2, forthcoming. Stay with Jeff Cameron Show / Seminole Headlines.